last week, but as a guy who's experienced a lot in the playoffs, what can you do to help some of those guys who don't have a lot of playoff experience, or none?
I know that the one thing that always comes up in the playoffs, and this might not be a direct answer to your question, but when the season does end, hopefully in 4 games from now, for the young players to understand that this doesn't come all the time. I've been with someone who played, 10 plus seasons, 13 seasons, and maybe never went to the playoffs or only got there once. And so, but for the time being, I think that same thing is that urgent approach of, hey, we're not trying to do anything outside of our framework, and don't be anything extra than you have been. You should have been doing that already this whole season. It still is important. But every single snap is life and death. And so when you're out there, maybe in the regular season against a non-conference opponent, plays over there, you're like, somebody else will get it, right? In the playoffs, no, you have to have the mindset that I'm the only person that can stop this player offensively. I have to make this block or this won't get a touchdown. And so being able to have that for full 60 minutes or however long it takes, I think you have to have some type of maturity. And so for our younger players who haven't had that experience, or even veteran players who never played in the playoffs, that could be a learning curve.
Is it a difficult balance to strike? Is that a difficult balance to strike where you want to kind of emphasize the importance of this moment but also treat it like it's just a normal game?
It's very tricky, and I think the best way to do it is just to delay it as much as possible. I already feel the excitement from some of the guys. They're getting in the playoffs for the first time or a long time here, and so I already feel that excitement. So you just want to try to encourage the calm before the storm as much as you can, because the night before the game, it's hard to sleep. I've been there every year. I mean, the day of the game, you get that juices flowing and stuff. So if you can delay it as much as possible, I think is the best bet.
Being a veteran, is that urgency reinforced by the fact that you know how much the league changes from one year to year, whether it's roster, you see a team win a Super Bowl one year and they don't get in the next, you have to maximize these opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think that's part of the emotion that comes to the game is that, unfortunately, to have gone to the playoffs the last 3 years and to come up short in each one of the games, right? Round 1, round 2, and the championship. Each one of those times, as I cried in my locker, it wasn't just that my chance at this year's Super Bowl is over. It's that some of the best friends that I have in the whole world aren't going to be there next year. And those relationships, as hard as you do to try to keep them, life goes on, and it's hard to keep up with all those relationships that you have. And so you go from spending 8 to 10 hours a day with someone for, and this is my first year here, but for some other players, could be years and years and years, to he's out of the league next year, he's on another team next year, you're on another team next year. And that's probably the hardest heartbreak for me, is because you always believe in yourself that you'll be on the team the following year and you'll have another chance to win the Super Bowl, but you won't be able to do it with the same group. And I'm a big relationship guy, and so I look around our locker room and I have so many people that are near and dear to my heart and I consider great friends of mine. And so just the reality of the business is that not everyone will be here next year, and you want to win it with the guys that you're brothers with,
Sure. Harrison, how much could you have envisioned when you first signed here that you would already have some of the relationships and the feeling like that you do have here already?
I was a little scared about that when I first left, because I had such great connections in my time with my former team. But I think a little bit of my personality is to try to mesh and to bond and be that guy that can mesh with the O-linemen and the corners and the receivers and try to bring every commonality between everybody. But I don't know if I thought it was going to be this quick, right? I'm getting my wedding invitation list planned out right now. There's a lot of Minnesota Vikings on it that I didn't plan for, and I'm looking at that budget thinking I didn't know I was going to be friends with this many guys. So, it's a blessing, and you've heard Ed talk about it a ton all year, and it's something that's been preached, but the partnership and connections is really a real thing. It's really cool.
Dalvin's a guy who I don't think has been in the playoffs yet in his 6 years. Yeah, Dalvin Thompson. But what have you kind of sensed from him, maybe heading into this week, especially that it's his old team too?
Well, I had joked with him, if I could remember back when he was in college, those SEC championship and national championship games, he kind of went stupid. And so I was like, no one in the world has ever seen playoff Dalvin before, so maybe we're all in for quite the movie. And that's, but no, he's a mature player, played in huge, big-time football games in his life and in his career here. And I think that he'll be on, 10 toes down the whole game.
Harrison, what's the biggest thing that changes when you talk about playing in a big game? What's the biggest difference that you feel on the field from one play to the next in a big game versus just a regular game?
It's just hard to describe, because you never like finish a game and you're like, oh, the guy I was going against wasn't giving his best. Like everyone is always giving their best, but I feel like when the playoff comes, you just find a little bit extra. Like there's just a little more adrenaline. It's like that fight or flight kicks in and you realize like, I don't want to go home tomorrow. Like I want to have my pads in my locker and hang out with my buddies tomorrow. So there's just a lot more to fight for. And somehow, whether it's momentum or some other thing, it just is more intense and it's fun. It is so fun.
Harrison, that the team chemistry you and many others have talked about, do you think that's been worth extra wins to this team in any?
Say that again? Like that's the reason we have more? Or?
Yeah, more. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that anyone in sport would tell you that a team more connected is going to hurt your team, right? You know, vice versa. So definitely some of those games when you look back down 10 at this team or down 33 here, whatever, I think some of those strength relationships of just like, no, I know this player. I've seen him in the weight room. I've seen him watch his film and practice. I trust he's dialed in. He's going to do his job. So probably some of that would probably have carried with us, and I'm sure we'll lean on that again through hopefully this next hopeful 4-game stretch.
Haven't been in this league a long time. 11-0 in one-score games. That's
Never been a part of that. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
It's never happened. Well, part of history then.
Do you guys get a sense of how just unique that is? That's you're not really going to duplicate that.
No, and I haven't smelled the roses right now enough. I think when you start patting yourselves on the back in the middle of the season, complacency can creep in and things like that. And not to be, I don't know what the right word is, politically correct or whatever, but if you don't win the whole thing, what's it really mean? You know, like that's the mindset we have every offseason. I go in and like, what do I have to do this year to put myself in position to be on a defense that can win a Super Bowl? What do I have to do? And that's always the goal. It's not to make a playoff or to win a division. Those are things along the way that it takes to get there. So once you're more removed from it, right? You go back to when I was in the AFC Championship a couple games ago and we lost to the Chiefs in that crazy way. In the time being, it was, you know, I didn't notice anything, didn't care about anything. And all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, you have time to heal, you kind of go back and look at it and say, wait a minute, I was the #1 defense in the NFL last year. Like, whoa, you can't, not everyone can say that, you know? And you look back at some of those accomplishments that you had and you say, oh, we were the best team on third down, or we were top 5 in takeover. But until, you know, when you're in the thick of this right now, only thing I'm looking at is forward into the next game, and you got to win the next game. So maybe at the end of the year, I could, you know, speak more on some of the accomplishments that we had this year. But as of now, I'm looking at all chips are on the table. I don't want to pat on the back or you know, it was good enough. I think we got to try to do it all.
But being, you know, 11-0 in one-score games and